So I want to just talk a little bit about how I got here and the kind of meandering route which took me here, which starts with me growing up. That's me. I am here with my mouth open at the birthday party, I think the fourth birthday party of my friend Lucy in Stevenage, where I grew up. There were very few black people where I grew up. Um, my dad left when I was one, so we was kind of single parent family before Lady Di made that fashionable, and um, and so from the get go, I had lots of questions. Lots of questions. This was the '70s. Why are those people shouting at us? Why did the policeman say that? Why can I do this? Why can I not do that? I had thanks to my mum, I had a lovely childhood, but I was always looking for answers for why things were, and always kind of struggling with like, well, if that's true, then what about this? So I remember my mum, when I was 10, she made me stay up and watch the miniseries, The Holocaust, and which completely freaked me out. And I didn't really have a term of reference for it. And my term of reference for discrimination and prejudice was mine because I was 10. So I thought, well, you can't see all discrimination and prejudice in my little world came from what people could see. So I thought, well, why didn't Jews just say, well, we're not Jews? Why, And that got me also thinking at that time about Northern Ireland and, well, how do you know if they're Catholics or Protestants? Like, how does this work? And realizing kind of much later, figuring out, well, there's lots of ways, aren't there, that you can tell where people are from and what they do, and kind of whether it's a school you went to or your name or this or that. But I would be kind of consumed by these riddles about how the world worked. And one thing that got me into was politics. It got me engaged in politics as a kind of because there were lots of things in the world that I didn't like, particularly that were happening to me, but not exclusively. But the other thing it did was just kind of train a mind of inquiry, where you thought, well, the newspapers and the TV, they're always lying about us, so I can't take anything for read, so I'm going to have to just find out a bit more about the things I'm interested in. And I was... my mum played a big role in this, and she was very quite a formidable Afro-Caribbean lady raising 3 boys by herself. I was the youngest. She was determined that we would go to university, and there was, I was quite anxious as a teenager, thinking I've got to get out. I've got to get out of Stevenage where I lived, and I really, really wanted to see the world. And I wanted to see the world partly because a lot of my experience growing up, particularly in the 70s and the early 80s in Britain, were people saying, well, you're not from here. Where are you really from? Really, though. And thinking, well, I really am from just down the road, but also knowing that there was something different. So there was a desire to travel. So I studied languages. I studied to be an interpreter. I studied French and Russian, but it was a degree in interpreting and translating at Heriot-Watt University. And I found here, because it was hard, it was really hard. I found my vocabulary book with just loads and loads of bloody words in it, just loads of words that I would have, the word to prompt and to confirm and natural gas and to stretch from and you just had to kind of keep going with this stuff just to kind of keep at it. And probably not surprisingly, given my personality, although I didn't exactly know what my personality was at the time, that kind of didn't want to make me be a translator or an interpreter. It's just like, I don't want to have a life where I'm just saying what other people are saying. I want to say things myself. I got involved in the student union and was running a rent strike when the Scotsman came to cover the rent strike. And the guy from the Scotsman who came to cover it, I was the student union sabbatical at the time, said, would you maybe want to write something? And I was too pompous, actually. I thought, no, I want people to write about me. But I did, and it was really hard, and I wasn't very good at it because it takes effort and practice, and I did put a lot of effort in, but I didn't have a lot of practice. But I really enjoyed it. And then I got paid for it. I got paid something like 40 quid or something like that. But, I mean, kind of not a lot, but it was money. Everybody likes money. And I thought maybe I'll do this. This was my student card from when I was in Leningrad. I'm going to hold it up close. You can see my hairstyle there. I have plaits. I was, it was still called Leningrad. The Leningrad Philological Institute. And I found this. This was a Corona find because I was clearing out my desk. So I thought I'd go into journalism. I got a bursary from the Scott Trust, which owns The Guardian, not a job, just a bursary to study journalism. And then afterwards, I did a couple of jobs round and about. Weirdly, ended up with a kind of a couple of shifts at The Guardian to do translating for foreign papers that they were getting in that they wanted someone to read. Timing was everything for me, and it was just at the beginning, just when the first South African elections with Mandela were about to start. They needed someone young, black, and cheap to go to South Africa. I was the cheapest young black person in the office, even though I didn't have a job. And so I was sent out to kind of get some of the stories that white journalists couldn't get. And to cut a fairly long story short, I stumbled into Obama's entourage. I couldn't drive, and so people would give me lifts, and I ended up getting some lifts with his bodyguards, and I amused them. I'd studied in the Soviet Union as they had, and I'd been involved in politics and the anti-apartheid movement, and they thought I was a funny little thing to have around. I was 25. I couldn't do any harm. So they would take me around with them when they cased the joint, and I ended up with this ringside seat on this amazing moment in world history when Mandela was elected for the first time in '94. And that was the beginning of my career. And during that time, I reported from a lot of the world. I got a fellowship to work in America. I came back with a girlfriend who became my wife. Then we went back to the States. That was in '96. We went back to the States in 2003, and I was the correspondent there for The Guardian for 12 years. Throughout that time, I'd written 3 books by then. Throughout that time, those things that I talked about right at the beginning, that inquiry, why is the world like this? What had continued and actually kind of sharpened that while I was in the States. There was the Iraq War, there was Bush, there was Katrina, there was Obama, there was the financial crisis, the Tea Party, the rise of Trump. It just kept going. And the kind of, the intensity, the kind of, and the contradictions wouldn't stop. And I wasn't one for particularly easy answers, you know, Trump, boo, or Bush, boo, or Obama, yes. And you're thinking, well, what's going on here? Why did that person just say that? They couldn't have meant that. They must have meant something else. Let me ask again, and so on. And the more it went on, and the more I was there, and then when I came back in 2015, I felt that journalism, which I loved, was just offering me too small a canvas to paint on. And that when I was writing books, I'd written 5 books by then, and the last one was about all of the kids who'd been shot dead in one day in America. I picked a day at random, and then I'd spent 2 years finding who they were and finding their families and so on, that I wanted to just do a bit more, go deeper, and that journalism isn't built for that in the way that academia is. And so I looked for a place and a culture that could take what I'd done and what I was interested in and marry it with what they do, and where I could kind of keep growing intellectually, not to stop doing journalism altogether, but to grow in areas where I felt that journalism can grow. And that took me to Manchester, and I look forward, as soon as the world starts turning again, to pursuing all of those interests.